Hi there, welcome to A Well-Purposed Woman. I'm Elizabeth, and today I'm going to show you how I took all the yarn in my yarn drawer and turned it into beautiful creations for Christmas. So all of these different Christmas decorations were created without knitting or without crocheting and just using basic techniques that anyone can do. But it felt really good to take some of that yarn I had sitting around and turn it into new decorations for Christmas this year. And if it's your first time here, remember to hit that little red subscribe button, and then you'll continue to get new videos as they come up. Otherwise, let's get started on making these cute little creations for Christmas. For this tassel banner, you will need 3 different colors of yarn. I used pink, purple, and turquoise in a size 2 yarn. Taking one of the colors of yarn and a 4.5-inch piece of cardboard, make revolutions around the cardboard with the yarn. I did about 50 revolutions with each tassel. You can vary that and so vary the width of the tassel to however much you like. I found that 50 revolutions worked well for my tassels. Once I finished the 50 revolutions of the tassel, then I just cut off one of the edges of the yarn, and I laid the yarn on the cutting mat, and then I took another piece of yarn that was about 6 to 8 inches in length, and I just tied a knot in the center of the yarn. Once you have the knot in the center of your yarn, then just take the yarn and fold it in 2. So now you have the base of your tassel. Take another piece of yarn that is 6 to 8 inches in length and just tie another knot 3/4 of an inch from the top of your tassel. So now you have your first tassel, and you'll just continue this process for however many tassels that you want. And you can also just trim off any extra yarn that's sticking out. And there you have it. That's your first tassel. And they are really pretty just how they are with the yarn. Since it was for a Christmas banner, I did decide to add some gold trim around the top portion where I had attached the yarn to hold the tassel in place. So I just cut off a small little piece of the gold trim and wrapped it around the tassel. And I continued that for each of the other tassels. Once I had finished making all the other tassels that I wanted, then I just took a longer section of the gold trim that I used around the tassel, and I used this as a banner for my tassels. So I just took each of the tassels and fed the trim through the center of the tassel to form a banner. When I was feeding the tassels through the trim, I did find it helpful to put a little piece of tape on the end of the trim so that it went through the tassel a little bit more smoothly and didn't disturb the yarn of the tassel as easily. And here's the final tassel banner hanging up on a hutch in our living room. It's cute, it's colorful, and it's fun and festive with the gold trim for Christmas. So I love it, but you can use any colors that you like and make it just how you want it. If you're not a big fan of having another banner in your house, another idea that I've seen is to create a tassel tree with a different tassel. So you can take a blank canvas like the one I have here and just arrange the tassels in the shape of a tree. And you can add a little branch on the bottom or something for a trunk. And that's really cute. You can just hot glue it in place. And that's another option for using up your tassels. For this gnome ornament, I started with this wooden heart from the Dollar Tree. I cut off the twine, the top of the heart, and I ended up covering the bottom of the heart with buffalo check fabric, which is like the gnome's hat. So I hot glued the fabric onto the bottom half of the heart to form the top of the gnome's head. Next, I took my chunky yarn. This is a size 7 braided yarn, and I just started unraveling the braided yarn to form some thinner yarn that looks more like the gnome's beard. And so I just took the yarn and I hot glued it below the hat on the ornament, covering up the top of the heart. I repeated that with the back and the sides of the gnome, covering up all the bottom of the heart to form the gnome's beard. Then I just gave my little gnome friend a beard trim, and he's looking pretty good. He just needs his little wooden nose, so I hot glued that on the center of the gnome. I added one other final touch around my gnome's hat. I attached some black rickrack, and this was two purposes. One was to just add a little bit of something interesting to the bottom of the hat, and the other purpose was to reinforce the yarn on the gnome's beard. To hang my gnome as an ornament, I just took a needle and went through the top of the gnome's hat with some twine, and I tied a knot at the bottom of the twine and another knot to loop the twine into a holder for my ornament. And here is our little gnome friend on our Christmas tree. He is all dressed for the season. And remember, you can switch up the fabric and the yarn. You wouldn't have to use the chunky yarn. You could just use a regular yarn and he'd still be just as cute. This next craft uses a mason jar lid. You can use any size, big or small, and a chunky yarn. I actually really liked using this Chanel chunky yarn, size 7. It is fluffy and works really cute with making these mini mason jar wreaths. So all you're going to do is hot glue the Chanel yarn in the center of the mason jar, and then just continue to wrap the yarn all the way around the mason jar lid. And this is what it looks like once you've wrapped it all the way around. Cut off the yarn and then just hot glue it again in the inside of the mason jar, and you end up getting a really cute little yarn wreath that you can use for an ornament. You can use it on top of a present to decorate the outside of a gift, and it's actually really cute just like this, but you could also dress it up a little bit, which I did end up doing. I did make a second mason jar lid with the braided yarn, and it still turned out really cute. It wasn't quite as fluffy as a Chanel yarn, but it is still a very cute little wreath. And like I did mention, I embellished these wreaths a little bit. Even though they were cute on their own, I added a little bit of Christmassy floral greens to the white wreath. And another option is to cover the inside of the wreath with some sort of background. All you'd have to do is just take a little mason jar lid, cover it with some scrapbook paper, and you have a cute little center of your wreath. Of course, if you're using this wreath as an ornament, you'd want to tie a little piece of twine to the top of the ornament and then attach the mason jar to the back of the wreath. And you can again cover the back of the wreath with another little piece of the scrapbook paper. And then you have these cute little wreaths that can go on to your Christmas tree. Here's our first one, and here's our second one with a little tree and ribbon added. And they're really sweet. And again, you could just leave them plain as well. I think that was almost as cute. So this next craft, you're going to start off by cutting out a stocking from a piece of cardboard. And if you want, there is a pattern below that you can use to cut out your little stockings with your cardboard. And once you have your cardboard stocking cut out, you can take a piece of felt or fabric and just cut out the bottom portion of your stocking. You're just going to use the felt to cover pretty much the toe of your stocking. Make a copy of the toe you just cut out because you're going to want to cover both sides of the cardboard with the felt. So once you have two different pieces of the of the felt cut out, then just go ahead and glue that to the bottom of your stocking. Then hot glue a piece of yarn on the edge of the felt, and all you're going to do now is just wrap the yarn around the stocking. And this part is pretty fun. It's something that children might enjoy doing with you. Just take your yarn, whatever color, whatever size that you want, and just wrap it around the stocking multiple times so you get a nice cozy looking full stocking. And then I took some chunky yarn and I actually just hot glued it on top of the stocking to kind of form a little bit of a fluffy top to my stocking, and it turned out really cute. I really liked how that looked, so I just hot glued that into place on the top of my stocking. And once I hot glued that into place, I just trimmed off the top of the cardboard, and I also decided that I thought it would look really cute on the bottom of the stocking. So I just repeated it, and I also hot glued chunky yarn along the bottom of the stocking to make it match. Then I just added a cute little button in the top corner of the stocking, and I added some twine with my needle in the top corner of the stocking and just tied it so that this little stocking can be used for an ornament. And here it is on our little tree. It's so cute and cozy. And you can also consider adding a little letter to the stocking to personalize it for people in your house. But these are super cute. They're kid friendly and they're really easy to make. With this next craft, I started by taking these MDF snowflakes from Hobby Lobby, which I purchased for 50% off. And the first thing I did was take some antiquing wax and just spread that on the top of my snowflakes. And here they are when I just rubbed off the excess of the antiquing wax on both the front and back of the snowflakes. Then I took my yarn and hot glued it on the back of the snowflake and just continued to wrap it around the snowflake. And I really didn't have any rhyme or reason to how I wrapped it. I just kind of went from one side to the other, just crisscrossing the yarn to make it look more like a six-pointed snowflake. But really I just kind of randomly wrapped it around the snowflakes, and I just did it until it was nice and full and looked how I wanted it to. You can use really any color yarn. I used some gray and some white, and both of it is really cute. I liked how both gray and white looked once the wood had the antiquing wax on top of it. Then I just cut off the yarn and hot glued it on the back of the snowflake. Then to finish off my snowflakes, I just used my little white buttons and I attached a button at each of the 6 points on my snowflake. And this gave the snowflake a little bit more interest and just made it really cute. And I did that with both the gray and the white snowflakes, and it just added a little something to make the ends of the snowflake pop a little and make it more like snow. And there you can see it when it's finished. And the last thing I did was feed some twine through the whole of the snowflake ornament and just tied the twine together so that the snowflake can be hung from a tree. And I was really pleased with how these snowflakes turned out. I think they're just super cute. And this would be another great craft to do with children. You wouldn't have to use the hot glue. You could just use regular glue and it would still be really cute. And here they are on our little Christmas tree. They're just super cozy and cute. And I ended up doing one without the antiquing wax, and I definitely liked it once I made the MDF a little bit darker. So you can do it either way, but this is what they look like when they're finished. For this next craft, we're going to be borrowing some skill from macrame. And we're going to be making a rainbow out of chunky yarn. So I used this chunky yarn that I had on hand already. It was a size 7 braided yarn. And you're going to start by cutting off 3 or 4, but I did 3 pieces of the chunky yarn, 10 inches, 8 inches, and 6.5 inches. You just want a little bit of variety in the sizes so that when you make the rainbow, you'll have the 3 distinct sizes for the rainbow. And the first thing you're going to do is take some floral wire, and you're going to cut it to be longer than each of the strips, and we're going to use this just to stabilize our yarn a little bit. And when you attach the floral wire, just leave 1 inch to 3/4 of an inch on each of the ends, and that's going to end up being our clouds of our rainbow. So the floral wire should just be running along each of the strips and then twisted on both ends 3/4 or 1 inch away from the end to give you some nice clouds for your rainbow. Now just repeat that for the other 2 strips. Then you're going to take 3 different colors that coordinate, and these are going to be the colors of your rainbow. So you can use natural looking colors. I kind of like these boho inspired natural looking colors. My children preferred the brighter colors, but you can choose any colors that match your Christmas decor. And you're just going to wrap around the chunky yarn and the floral wire. So take your yarn and just continue wrapping all the way around the chunky yarn, trying to keep the same amount of thickness to the entire length of the strip, because you want it to be a nice, even rainbow stripe. So I did wrap the chunky yarn once with the yarn, and then I came back around and I wrapped it another time just to even out any areas that were thinner. And once you're satisfied with the way that your roll looks, then just hot glue the end of the yarn into place, and then you're going to repeat that same process for the next 2 stripes of your rainbow. And then just take your ends and fluff them up, make them look as much like clouds as you can. Cut off any extra with your scissors and just get that really fluffy look. This white chunky yarn did a good job of resembling clouds, so I was pleased with how it looked in the end. Now to attach your rainbow, you're going to first take some twine, and in the top stripe of your rainbow, tie a piece of twine in the center, and this is going to be how you're going to hang your rainbow on your Christmas tree. So just make a knot and then tie another knot, looping the twine so that you have a nice hanger for your rainbow. Then take your hot glue gun and just on the top edge of each of the stripes, put a little bit of hot glue, and this is how you're going to attach the rows to each other. And I kind of did a really bendy bow here, so just put the hot glue in between the 2 different rows and squeeze it into place. Then just repeat that for the next row and hot glue the top edge, squeeze it on to the other rows in your rainbow. And then just trim off any extra yarn you have on the bottom of your clouds, and then that's it. You have your little rainbow. And there she is, all warm and cozy and ready to decorate your Christmas tree. This next craft is a pom-pom wreath, and you can make either a garland or a wreath with these pom-poms or anything else you would like. But to start, you're going to take a piece of cardboard. I used a piece that was 3 inches long, and you're just going to take the yarn of your choice and start wrapping it around that 3-inch part of the cardboard. Now for a nice full pom-pom, I recommend wrapping it 150 to to 200 times. I know it sounds like a lot, but it really is necessary for getting a nice pom-pom that's easy to fluff and you don't have to do much work after you wrap it. So just continue wrapping it 150 to 200 times. And once you're done wrapping the yarn, just take the piece of cardboard out through the center of the yarn and just set it aside. And then you're going to take another long strip of 8 to 10 inches of yarn, and you're just going to tie a knot in the center of your little bundle of yarn. So you don't want it to shift around a lot or anything, and just gently lay it on your table. Tie the knot in the center, and then you're just going to take your scissors and start cutting through those loops on both sides. I like to do one side at a time, so I just take a sharp scissors and just cut through all the loops on one side of the pom-pom and then turn it around and do the other side, and being careful not to cut through that center knot that you made. So sometimes I will hold the pieces of yarn off to the side so I know where those center pieces of yarn is. But then just go ahead and trim your pom-pom into a nice fluffy ball, and you can use a circle shape or something to kind of guide you as you trim. I actually used a mason jar lid on this pom-pom just to give it a nice circular ball shape to it. And again, just remember to do one side at a time. So once you've done one side of the pom-pom, then just kind of take the lid off and switch it to the other side and trim that side as well. And you'll get a nice shape ball, and you just continue the same process until you get enough pom-poms for making a wreath or a garland. To make a pom-pom garland, you can just simply take a long strip of twine and tie your pom-poms onto the twine in a row, and you can just form a really pretty garland as simple as that. And then just choose the number of pom-poms you want on your garland, and that's all there is to making a pom-pom garland. Another option, which I actually ended up doing with these pom-poms, is to turn your pom-poms into a wreath, and I will show you how to do that next. Now for this craft, I probably recommend a foam wreath form, but since I didn't have one of those and I wanted to use what I had on hand, I used this 8-inch wire wreath form from the Dollar Tree, and I just covered it in a white felt and hot glued it into place. And then I decided, instead of hot gluing the pom-poms onto the wreath, that I would just tie them on the wreath. This way, if I changed my mind about wanting this pom-pom wreath, I could easily take off the pom-poms. And so what I did was I just took pieces of yarn that were left over and I just tied the pom-pom around the wreath. Now this was a mini wreath, so one row of pom-poms was sufficient for giving it a nice full look. So I just continued to tie pom-poms all the way around the wreath. I decided I wanted to add a little bit of embellishment to the center of the wreath, and so I found some white Christmas bottle brush trees and I just hot glued them into the center of the wreath. To hang the wreath, I used a piece of black and white boho inspired upholstery webbing, hot glued it together, and just used that to hang the wreath, and I love how it turned out. It really looks modern and cute, and the black and white is fitting in with my Christmas decor this year, so I love this pom-pom wreath as well. Now you might not be too surprised with this next yarn craft. We're going to be making yarn Christmas trees. So to get started, you're going to want to use either paper mache or styrofoam cone-shaped tree. I found this one at Hobby Lobby. And I started my trees by adding a little stump to the bottom of them. So I took my paper mache tree and I just cut a hole in the bottom of it, and I attached my little birch log, and that just created a little stump for my tree. Now you can leave these trees just how they are. You don't have to add any type of stump or planter or anything to the bottom of them. But I thought it would look really cute to add a little extra stump to the bottom. So I cut a hole in the bottom of the paper mache tree. To attach the yarn onto the paper mache tree, you're just going to use hot glue. So start by adding hot glue to the bottom of your tree. Use your chunky yarn and just wrap it around the stump, and then just continue to do that to cover the bottom of the tree. Hot glue, wrap your yarn, and hold it into place. Now, if you didn't add the stump, of course you wouldn't have to wrap around the stump, just cover the bottom of the tree with the yarn. And then you're just going to continue to hot glue, wrap the yarn, hold in place all the way around your paper mache tree. And these trees that I picked up at Hobby Lobby were pretty large, so it took me a while to get all the way around the tree, and it just required a little bit of patience. And just be extra careful when applying the hot glue that you don't burn yourself. You just gotta keep an eye on where you apply the glue. And then as I wrapped around the tree, I tended to just glue one side of the tree. I didn't glue both sides. I just kind of glued on one side, and then I flipped it around and glued on the other side for different parts of the tree. But just scrunch the rows of yarn together to get a nice tight fit, and just continue wrapping until you get to the top of your paper mache tree. Once I got to the top of the tree, I cut off the yarn and used the hot glue to hold the end of the yarn in place, just being careful not to burn yourself. Now, these trees were so long and tall that I thought they needed something to break them up. So I took a little garland that I made out of wooden stars and mini pine cones, and I just wrapped that around one of the trees and gave it a little garland. I thought that made it look cute. And then with the second tree, I just took a Christmas pick and wrapped it around the center of the tree with the twine, and you can see that here. This next craft borrows a technique from macrame as well. So start by cutting out a piece of cardboard that's 11 inches in length. Wrap yarn around the cardboard 20 times. Then take your scissors and cut off both sides of the yarn so that you will have 40 pieces of yarn to work with. Take a wooden dowel and set it in the center of your workspace, and then you're going to take 2 pieces of the yarn and you're going to make a loop underneath the wooden dowel with 1 piece, and you're going to loop a second piece, which you're going to pull through the center of the loop of the first piece. And then once you cross over the wooden dowel, pull the ends of the first piece through the second piece. So I slowed down the video a little bit so you can see me do this in slow motion. Again, loop one side or 1 piece of the yarn, then take a second piece of yarn and loop it as well. Pull the second loop through the first loop, and then take the the ends of the first piece and pull it tight. And then you're just going to continue that same motion for the rest of the length of the tree, and you can do it as small or as large as you want it. Just continue to loop the yarn and pull it tight for the rest of the length of the wooden dowel. And you can also do this with a piece of yarn instead of the wooden dowel, so it would be more similar to macrame. I used the wooden dowel just because it's a Christmas tree, and I liked how it gave me a little bit of a base at the end of the tree. So once you have it as full as you want it, then take a little wooden star, a little wooden bead, and just hot glue it onto the top of your tree. This just makes it look more like a Christmas tree and adds a cute little touch to it. And once that's in place, then I cut a triangle shape out of a piece of cardboard and then just laid that on top of my tree, and that was my pattern for cutting the sides of the tree. I did cut off the extra length of the wooden doll on the bottom of the tree, and I covered that little section with twine. Then I took another piece of twine and I tied it to the top of the Christmas tree, and this was to be a hanger for the little ornament on my tree. Once I was satisfied with how my tree looked, I took a little bit of Mod Podge and I just wiped it on the tree with a paintbrush, and this just helps the yarn to stiffen up a little bit. Once it dries, it will hold the yarn in place a little bit better, and so I just spread that on the front and back of the tree. Once that was dried, then I just hot glued a couple little buttons on place on the tree. That's another one I made, and that was it. Then I hung it up on my Christmas tree. You may have seen this next craft on last week's tin can crafts. So for this craft, you're going to want to use an ordinary tin can, chunky yarn. This is a size 7, and it's from Hobby Lobby, a hot glue gun and glue sticks, and then you're going to want some sort of paint or primer. I used the spray primer. You could also use an acrylic paint and a brush. I started by taking my tin cans outside and spraying a thin coat of the primer. Once the cans were primed, I let them dry and brought them back inside, and then I applied hot glue on the bottom of each of the cans and I attached it to some cork board. I took my X-Acto knife and then I cut around the perimeter of the tin can so that the tin can has a nice cork bottom, and this just adds a higher end touch to the tin cans and it'll help it sit nicely on your table or mantelpiece. Once I had the cork on the bottom, then it was time to start attaching the chunky yarn. So I just put a blob or whatever of the hot glue and I attached the chunky yarn. I held it in place for a couple seconds until it was set. And then I just continued to take my hot glue and go around the perimeter of the can. And I did, where the cork board was cut, I kind of did wrap on the side of that just to hide any imperfections I had when I had cut out the cork. So it kind of did a nice job of making it have a nice clean look. And so I just continued hot gluing it and then holding the chunky yarn in place until I covered the entire can. And that worked pretty well. I did sometimes hold the yarn a little bit longer just to make sure that it was adhering nicely to the can. And I did have to be careful, like when I came to the end of or where the yarn was meeting, then I just kind of started the next row. You could also just cut off the yarn at that point and then do another row, because when you just continuously wrap the yarn, you do end up possibly going at a little bit of an angle because you're moving up to the next row. So you could cut it off at this point and then just wrap it again with another strip of the yarn. I think next time I actually would probably do it that way, but this worked okay and it turned out pretty nicely still. And then once I came to the top of the can, I just covered the top of the can with one more row of the yarn. This is just to avoid any like ouchy edges or whatever from the tin can. So the yarn just covered it up nicely and gave me a nice soft outer rim. And I like how it turned out. It's just really warm and cozy and perfect for a little Christmas tree or greens for Christmas. And you could add additional things, but I like it kind of just with the chunky yarn, so I'll keep it like that for now. And here's the planter when it is completed. Let me know below which of these crafts is your favorite. I would love to know. And I know all of these different crafts aren't necessarily coordinating, but I just wanted to give you an idea of just the variety of crafts that you can make without having any necessarily special skills in knitting or crocheting. You can still use yarn to make beautiful crafts for Christmas, and it's a great way to use up any scrap yarn that you have in your drawers or lying around the house. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it and want to see more, hit that subscribe button below. Otherwise, thank you for being here and happy crafting.